Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers enter a big year in 2024. After a 6-7 season, a lot of people expect them to take a step forward in terms of success. We take a deep dive into the Auburn Tigers and look at what we should expect from every position as well as the entire team this season. Before we do that, though, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video as well. So far, it has been a great response by all of you for this series. It's been a really fun series to do. I love hearing from all of you and what your expectations are and going over these depth charts, these deep dives. Auburn is no different, so let's get right into it. We start with Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze did a great job at Liberty. Obviously, takes the Auburn head coaching job after some turmoil with the previous regime, but now has provided some stability for this group heading into 2024. And there are still areas where you need to improve, but I think you've done a good job of retaining key talent as well as bringing in certain talent to elevate this group as well. Offensive coordinator Derek Nix has work to do, and Freeze will obviously have his hand in that, but this is a group that needs to throw the ball better for sure. That much is pretty obvious. If you finished 124th last year, that much needs to improve. You have to find a little bit more balance. You can't run the football everywhere, even though they did a pretty good job of running the ball despite a limited passing attack. Defensive coordinator DJ Durkin has plenty of talent to work with, and we'll dive into that despite some of the talent that they lost last year. But this is a defensive group that could still be a solid group after what we saw last year. Again, a 6-7 season in 2023 is not really anything that Auburn fans are going to cheer about. But if you take a step back and look at the big picture, there's plenty of reason to be excited about where this program is heading under Freeze. And this will be a big year, another big year to determine how well this group will do long term. When you take a look at the transfer portal and what they brought in, they lost quite a bit of talent to the transfer portal. And I think in addition to that, you probably lost more talent to the NFL. And that's to be expected, though. I think Auburn expects to have NFL talent year in and year out. And it just comes down to how do you replace it and what are you able to do to elevate certain positions that maybe were weaknesses last year. Gage Keys kind of an underrated transfer. We'll talk about him on the defensive line. Keandre Lambert-Smith was a solid addition, a veteran that can help the passing attack. Again, when you struggled as much as you did, as Auburn did last year, you need to find options to elevate that group. Sam Jackson V comes in from Cal as a former quarterback. So we'll see what he can do. His speed is something that staff really likes. We'll talk about him. Robert Lewis comes in from Georgia State. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Antonio Kite, Jaron Thompson, Trill Carter, those are guys who will be bigger contributors for this defense in 2024. So you brought in plenty of talent despite some of the players that you lost. And that's really exciting if you're an Auburn fan, because you maybe think, oh, well, these guys didn't exactly help us. Let's bring in this talent that's going to elevate this unit, which is going to help the guys around them. And maybe you make that defense as a whole better, or that offense. And the offense will start into, because the quarterback position is going to be the group that's under the most scrutiny, as with every program. The quarterback position deserves the most attention. They get the most love. They also are under the biggest and brightest spotlight. So if you can find a way to get Peyton Thorne on another level, then maybe you're able to get this offense going a little bit better. And the pass catchers they have back play a big role in that as well. But I think that a lot of that has to do with what Peyton Thorne can do. Now, when you look at Thorne and what he did at Michigan State 2 years ago and his success when he burst onto the scene, this is someone who actually it was 3 years ago when he did this, but at Michigan State, he had his big year, and everyone thought that Michigan State was going to be a contender and back where they needed to be under that coaching staff. And obviously things didn't work out, but we know that he has it in him to be a solid quarterback. Last year wasn't exactly great. Over 1,700 yards, had 16 touchdowns, but also had 10 interceptions, run for 515 yards and 3 touchdowns as well. So we know he can do with his legs. We know he's capable of making plays with his arm and his legs, a dual threat that can do a lot of exciting things, and should have plenty of talent to hit downfield this year. But it's on him to take that step forward. This coaching staff knows, hey, we brought in this talent. Our quarterback needs to find ways to get them the football. And if he's not the guy, then I'm not really sure what's exciting behind him. But you have a couple options: Holden Geriner and Hank Brown, two guys that are waiting for their opportunity. And if Thorne can't get the job done, we will see. But the quarterback position is probably one of the bigger X factors on this team. And the passing attack, just plain and simple, has to get better. If you take even the slight finishing 124th, you really can only go up from there. And if you do go up even the slightest bit, this offense as a whole gets better because the rushing attack is in good hands, especially with Jarquez Hunter coming back. Jarquez Hunter, one of the best running backs in college football. And there's also good depth behind him, Damari Alston and Jeremiah Cobb, two guys that will be in that rotation, especially with how much this team will want to run the football. Unfortunately, Brian Battie won't be a factor. I just wanted to talk about him. He was so fun to watch at USF. He's an explosive player that is very capable of doing very good things for an offense. Just the unfortunate events that transpired this offseason. I hope that he's doing all right. I just really thinking about him this offseason, and I'm sure the Auburn community as well has been thinking about him. It just didn't want to talk about this position without talking about him because of what he could have done. But Auburn's still in good hands. I think that Jarquez Hunter is set for a monster year. Again, if that passing attack takes a step forward, Hunter is going to have 1,000-yard season because teams can't load up the box. And especially in the SEC, that is huge. If you can take away some of that talent from the box and say, hey, let our running backs cook, let them do what they do best, you're going to open up a world of opportunities for that offense as a whole. And when you look at the guys that are going to catch those passes, it makes it easy to see why a lot of that pressure is on Peyton Thorne. Cam Coleman is a freshman who everyone is expecting big things from. You saw what he's capable of doing in the spring game. Someone who has a lot of potential, a big ceiling, and this is a program that expects him to contribute right off the bat. And again, you've seen what he's capable of doing. We've been hearing about him all offseason, and now we get to see what he can do against SEC competition. Can he handle that transition once it's not his own teammates he's going against? Is he the real deal? Is the hype justified, if you will? I think what we've seen so far, you're going to see some exciting things. There obviously will be a learning curve. You can't just expect a freshman to come in and dominate right off the bat, but you can expect some good things from Cam Coleman. You can expect some good things from the rest of this offense too, because when Cam is struggling, you have some veterans coming here to help him in that regard, help him learn, hey, this is part of the process. This is how we do this and almost act as professionals. This is what you need to do on a day-to-day basis. Are you having a tough week? Maybe you're having a tough stretch of games where you're not catching as many passes or you're not getting open as much. This is what you can go back and do. You can go back to the drawing board, and guys like Keandre Lambert Smith, Robert Lewis, and even tight end Rivaldo Fairweather can go up to him and say, here's what you need to do. Here's the guidance that you need. And that's going to be huge. That's a dynamic that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, is that Cam has those mentors in place for if he's having a tough time. And then when he gets to sophomore season, and even if those guys aren't there, you have a foundation built where he can be that guy for other people. Now, Keandre Lambert Smith, kind of a surprise that Auburn was able to get him. Now, he's not wasn't going to be one of the most coveted wide receivers in the transfer portal, but the former Penn State transfer was a solid player, someone who is not going to be wide receiver one, but fills that wide receiver two or even three role pretty well. 673 yards and 4 touchdowns with the Nittany Lions last year. Robert Lewis comes in, could be a guy that works out of the slot a little bit more than the other guys. 877 yards and 7 touchdowns at Georgia State. So everyone's got their eyes on those two guys at the wide receiver position. If you can take a step forward and be that reliable player and be that veteran that the young guys need, then you're going to be just fine. Again, a lot of that has to do with the chemistry with Peyton Thorne. If they can get the football from him, they're in good hands. Rivaldo Fairweather is the leading returning receiver or pass catcher, I should say, for Auburn. And that's almost a little bit sad because he only had 394 yards and 6 touchdowns. That speaks to the struggles of the passing attack. This is the group, we've said it time and time again. You have to get better. This group just has to get better. This area of the offense must improve. Hugh Freeze knows that. This offensive staff knows that. Derek Nix is aware of that. And you have the talent, though. You didn't sit around and let everything happen. You took advantage of opportunities to bring in guys like Lambert Smith, to bring in Lewis. Those are players you brought in, and you expect them to contribute. Now, we talked about Sam Jackson, the fifth. He is a former Cal quarterback, but they're switching him to wide receiver. He's an explosive player, and that's what people really liked about him as a quarterback. And it sounds, from what I've heard and read, that he is doing a pretty good job of making that transition to wide receiver. They really like his explosive abilities. He's done a really good job of learning the position, learning the nuances of that position, and he could be someone to keep an eye on. Caleb Burton and Camden Brown are two other players that return to Auburn this year and didn't have the biggest roles in the offense, but could be players that fit into that rotation and are able to make a bigger impact than they did last year. The tight end position lacks a little bit of depth, so if Fairweather isn't able to go, maybe a guy like Luke Deal can be that guy to step up. So we will see. But this pass catching group has plenty of talent. You have the ability to make big plays, and from there, the offense should be just fine. And the offensive line is going to be a group that will, if you will, be solid despite some of the players that they lost. You bring in a guy like Percy Lewis coming from Mississippi State, so you got to get used to the new playmakers, the new teammates that you have. But he is an experienced player who comes in with plenty of talent to join this group. Dylan Wade played left tackle last year, and Lewis's arrival allows him to slide into guard. So I think that's a really good move for this offense and for Wade as well. Wade is an absolute monster at his peak. He is a former Tulsa transfer who dominated AAC competition and then found that he could do similar things in the SEC. Connor Lewis, someone who stepped up in a big way last year as a freshman. With Avery Jones out, you saw Lewis step up and take over that center position. So you feel really good about what he can do heading into 2024 because he's not brand new. He's not as green as he was last year because he was forced into that starting role. And I honestly, he did it in stride. He took things as they were, and he found ways to improve. And obviously, there was probably a learning curve, but now you come into 2024 with experience, with the knowledge of what it takes to win in the SEC. So that's really exciting if you're an Auburn fan. Jeremiah Wright and Isavion Miller are going to round things out on the right side of the line. And there's plenty of talent behind them, plenty of experience as well. When you look at what this group has, you have guys like Tyler Johnson and Dylan Sineda that aren't as experienced, but this staff really likes. They expect some exciting things from them. And then you have experienced players like Tate Johnson and Jaden Muskrat. Those are guys with plenty of experience, or 50 games of experience under their belt. So you have guys that are good depth pieces. You have plenty of options. Should one of these guys go down in front of them, they need a break, it's just not working. You have options in case you need it. And again, if this offense can take a step forward, that takes some pressure off of a defense that I think will be really fun. This is a group that maybe doesn't have a ton of experience at certain positions, or they have groups that need to get better. But I think that overall, you look at this defense, you start with the defensive line, and the word here has to be potential because there's not a ton of production so far. But I think that you're looking at, we talked about Cam Coleman, what he needs to do offensively as a younger player. Eldrick Falk is someone who started with Auburn as a freshman last year, and he got his feet wet and found what it took to be an SEC player. 35 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss. He is really fun to watch. He is someone who is capable of taking that next step. And again, when you have starting experience and you've gotten a taste of, again, what does it take to win in the SEC, a conference that is extremely difficult to be successful in, and you're able to do that, then you're looking at a potential big sophomore year because you got that taste, you know what's expected of you, and now you have a full offseason to put in work, to get bigger, to get stronger, to get faster, and put that to good use. Two interior transfers that they took, Trill Carter, who's kind of buried on Texas depth chart, the former Texas and Minnesota transfer, could be a huge addition for this team. Gage Keys comes in from Kansas. Again, the production not necessarily there. Potential for both of those players is. The Buck position is a really interesting position to watch because I don't think a lot of people talked about Jalen McLeod last year. I don't think we're talking about him enough. The former App State transfer transitioned well to the SEC. 48 tackles, 10 and a half tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. Someone who deserves more recognition than he's getting, and someone who will continue to be that way with most people kind of looking elsewhere. This is the SEC, and so people are going to give more love to players that are more well known. Jalen McLeod is someone who deserves more love, and putting him opposite of Keldrick Falk could give Auburn an underrated group of pass rushers, people who can be disruptive, that kind of stuff. The depth behind them, there's some solid depth, and there are some players that the one thing I'll say about Auburn's defense is it's very young outside of its starters. There are a lot of freshmen and underclassmen that are going to play bigger roles as depth pieces or even as starters. And when you look at, now Zykevius Walker is not one of those guys. The defensive tackles positions, Jason Jones, Bobby Jameson, Travis, DJ Reed, Malik Blockton, those guys are not going to maybe fit into that role. But a guy like Amaris Williams, who can play the buck position if McLeod can't go, it's someone to keep an eye on. The staff really likes him. Demonte Walker and Joseph Phillips are also freshmen that could play on the defensive line as well. There's so many freshmen that are set to take steps in terms of being bigger contributors this year. And that's really, really exciting if you're an Auburn fan looking long term. It may not be super exciting in the short term because if you have that many freshmen playing early in their career, there's going to be bumps in the road. They will need time to transition, but you have a lot of excitement for the future because you know exactly what you're getting into and you know what this means for the future. You may need to take some time to get them acquainted to what it is required to compete in this conference, but you at least have the veterans in front of them that can help them transition as well. This linebacker position really is no different. Eugene Asante comes back. Austin Keys is back as well. So you have two players that have experience, but then you look at a guy like Demarcus Riddick, a freshman from Alabama who was going to figure into that rotation. Dorian Mausi from Duke, he'll be a pushing for starting time as well. So it's going to be a trio of guys. And then after that, it's going to be some younger guys like Riddick that will step up there. The linebacker position will be important for this defense because, like I said, the defensive line has some questions in terms of experience and does that potential turn into production? And then also, do you have younger guys playing for the first time? That's another thing to keep an eye on because if you don't, that puts a lot of pressure on the linebackers to make more plays. Maybe you need some more depth, but freshmen will play a big role. And guys like Riddick, who are super talented, the staff also likes him. Mars Williams and Marcus Riddick are probably two guys to keep an eye on for this Auburn defense that could take big steps and could be big time contributors and skyrocket, or I should say, jumpstart their careers early because they're going to push for playing time. The secondary has lots of potential. Now, this is a group that finished 31st in defending the pass. You lose two starting cornerbacks, and I think a lot of people have concerns about the safety position. There's plenty of talent to go around, though, and you also added some players in the transfer portal. Kane Lee was probably the third best corner for Auburn last year. He is back. He is someone that can be a leader for this group and could be the next NFL draft pick for the Auburn Tigers. Safety position is really probably the biggest question, but you bring in Jaron Thompson. That was a huge addition from Texas. I think that eases some of those concerns. Caleb Wooden, a guy who had the pick in the Music City Bowl last year, is someone who this staff expects to take a big step forward. Another corner that moving in from nickel, but this staff is really high on this. Keontae Scott, he and Lee are going to be under the spotlight quite a bit. Now the safety position, like I said, is going to be under a bigger spotlight, but Scott and Lee are two guys that could have all conference type seasons if they're able to take those steps and now inherit their new roles and thrive under those new positions. Champ Anthony, great name, and also will contribute at the nickelback position. So you have plenty of options in the starting rotation. And after that, though, is where things really, really get interesting because you have very little experience. The only person in this backup rotation that has actually two guys really that have any experience are going to be Terrence Love and Tyler Scott, and they have a combined 8 tackles. So you're not going to see a ton of experience. And you're also going to see, once again, this is the theme, freshman. Jay Crawford could figure into the cornerback rotation, freshman from Georgia that the staff really loves. Laquan Robinson's a JUCO transfer, but he is someone who could fit into that safety rotation. After that, Sylvester Smith, JC Hart, and Kensley Ledeur Faustin are three guys, two redshirt freshmen and a freshman from Florida that will be in that rotation as well. So this is a young group that will probably need to grow up. You're going to have to learn a lot from the veterans in front of you, soak up all of that knowledge that you can get. And if you have to be on the field, yeah, just deal with it. Just figure it out. And it may not be the easiest year, but if you go through the fire and you come through after a tough season, you will have a lot to use for 2025. And this is a group that has plenty of talent, but can you put it all together? The defense probably has more of the concerns than the offense, but I think that this is still a really good group that should be I think that they should be a solid group. It's just, it's not all on them either. The offense simply has to, I think, take a step forward and show that the passing attack can be better. And to me, the strengths for this team include a lot of that offense, though. The running back position to me is a strength. You maybe don't have you have concerns about if your offense can be balanced. The passing attack plays a role in that, but the running back position to me is solid. Same with wide receiver. I don't have too many concerns about the wide receiver position. I think that the quarterback position is really where that biggest concern on the offense comes up. Linebacker to me is solid. Now you maybe if you include Jalen McLeod in that linebacker group, depending on how you view the buck position, I think that's a solid group. McLeod, Asante, and Keys are probably the biggest strength for that group. They have the talent on top of the production. The concerns for this, though, is going to be experience on defense. We talked about how many freshmen you have. That's a young group. That is a very young group that needs to grow up quickly. And if they don't, they could be in for a long season. Safety is going to be a concern, but you could probably just put the whole secondary in there as well because you don't have a ton of experience. And again, freshman is really where it is. And it's not to say that this group can't be good, but if you have to look at what you're concerned about, what you think could be potential problems, then you're looking at that defense as a potential concern, or I should say the secondary is a potential concern, and that's going to be the X factor. Quarterback and secondary probably going to be the X factor of this team this year. The schedule is never going to do you any favors when you're in the SEC, but this is a group that we will see what they're capable of doing. And I think that when you're looking at the schedule, the ceiling to me is not going to be very high. You're going to look at a group that might struggle to find wins and maybe not early on because I think that this schedule does them some favors in the first few games, but you also have to look at what we saw last year. But 7.5 wins feels like a high number. I feel like if I was betting this right now, I would probably hit the under. But 7.5 wins is tough in the SEC. Alabama, A&M, Cal, and New Mexico start the year. Now, Cal gave them a little bit more trouble than he'd probably like to admit, but those should be 3 wins. Cal is probably the only one that I'm concerned about, though that game is at home. Arkansas and Oklahoma. I think people have concerns about Arkansas. People also have concerns about Oklahoma. I find it tough to believe that you will win both of those games, but it's not out of the realm of possibilities. The next three games, though, I don't know who Auburn made mad, whom Auburn is upset, but at Georgia, at Missouri, and at Kentucky are brutal. That's not fun, and that's going to be a rough time. Playing Georgia, I have to play Oklahoma. Then you get 2 weeks to play Missouri. 2 weeks before you play Missouri, and then you play at Kentucky. That's tough as well. Vanderbilt and ULM are going to be wins unless Vanderbilt just surprises everyone. That's going to be a win. Texas A&M and at Alabama is a tough way to end the year. So again, 7.5 feels a little bit much. If you're looking at optimistically, I think 8-4 is the ceiling. Floor to me is 5-7. I think that you can find 5 wins. I don't want to say pretty easily. You can find 4 wins easily. Alabama, A&M, New Mexico, ULM for sure, and then one between Vanderbilt and Cal, you're going to win one of those games. If you lose both of those, then something's going drastically wrong. But this is a group that should still be in contention for a bowl game. There should be a group that is expecting to win 6 games for sure. But I don't think 7.5 wins. If you're hitting the over, you must see something that I don't. The defense obviously has some things to figure out. They need to grow up really fast. And that passing attack, like I said, needs to take a step forward. But this is still a group that I really am excited about long term. Hugh Freeze, it knows what he's doing. He's brought in the right talent. And again, just because this group is young now doesn't mean that's a bad thing for the rest of his tenure there. And for the future, I think that you're in good hands despite that youth in 2024.